Good morning. I'm Vincent Fluellen. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer here at Webster University. It's a real pleasure to welcome you all here, those of you who are joining me in this room, and of course, those of you who are joining us virtually. This is our 7th annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. And while it's our 7th annual conference, DEI has always been in the DNA of Webster University. Webster was founded in 1915 by women to educate women, 4 years before white women could legally vote in the United States. It was in the DNA of the university when we admitted the first sight-impaired student and opened the first Braille library in the St. Louis region. In World War II, Webster enrolled a group of Japanese American women whose families were imprisoned in the internment camps. And in 1950, Webster graduated the university's first 2 black students 4 years before the landmark Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court ruling. And now, here we are in 2022. Our theme this year is everyday inclusion, right here, right now. And it came into focus for us as we considered the persistent question of, what can I do? And so, our goal for this conference is to share immediate, practical, and impactful ways to practice everyday inclusion as individuals and institutions. I encourage you to join in and not only actively participate in the conference, and this online community platform, but to also take what you learn back into your workspaces, your organizations, your classrooms, your families, and communities. Please share this information and continue these conversations to help foster a more diverse and inclusive environment where we can all thrive. We would like to extend our sincere appreciation to our sponsors who share our commitment to catalyzing and sustaining the work of building a more equitable society. Their support and investment allows us to keep this conference free and open to the public, not only locally, but across the U.S. and globally, so that thousands of participants in 24 countries can benefit from these resources. Our visionary sponsor is Reassurance Group of America. Our advocate sponsors are Kristen Johnson, Nestle Purina, R&L, Schnucks, Spire, and UMB Financial. Our ally sponsors are Armstrong Teasdale, Brown & Crouppen, CBiz, Cigna, Delta Dental, the Jane M. and Bruce P. Robert Charitable Foundation, St. Louis Community Foundation, the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis, Sumit Verma and Nisha Darna. Our print media sponsor is the St. Louis American, and our radio media sponsor is St. Louis Public Radio. This conference would not be possible without our presenters, moderators, and panelists. They have our appreciation and esteem for giving of their time so generously and their expertise. We also extend our gratitude to the many Webster colleagues who worked collaboratively to bring this conference to fruition. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Chancellor of Webster University and wish her an extended or belated happy birthday to Dr. Beth Stroble for our opening remarks and to introduce our first session.
Well, thank you. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to Webster University's 7th Annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. Vincent has set the tone for this year's conference as we again embrace the learning that comes from engaging with those who generously share their knowledge, their lived experiences, and their perspectives with us. That learning is needed now more than ever. The world, as we are keenly aware, can be a place of challenge and conflict, born of the human failure to embrace the bonds of our shared humanity, bonds that transcend language, culture, nationality, race, gender, and all the other human characteristics to which we, in our bias, assign value and hierarchy. Webster University is an educational institution, a university that spans a rich global community embedded in the St. Louis region for more than 100 years and providing an educational home to students in 4 different continents: North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. We, as a university community, seek to value and respect individual differences, causing each one of us to feel what is genuinely a sense of belonging and being at home. Well, the presenters and panels at this conference help us to make necessary steps right now, right here, on a path to equity as we mark our progress on a journey that is far from complete. It is because we are educators that we believe that this conference can and will make a difference, just as the 6 conferences that preceded it. I'm reminded of this statement by the late Bell Hooks. My hope emerges from those places of struggle where I witness individuals positively transforming their lives and the world around them. Educating is a vocation rooted in hopefulness. As teachers, we believe learning is possible, that nothing can keep an open mind from seeking after knowledge and finding a way to know. In that spirit, we seek after knowledge in many sessions over the next 2 days, and we'll begin with our first this morning. And I'm pleased to introduce our opening session. Our moderator for this session, Diversity and Faith Traditions, is someone I know well, Dr. Paul Stroble. My husband, who teaches both at Webster and at Eden Theological Seminary. He has taught courses in religion, philosophy, and history for more than 25 years. Because Paul and I both had experiences of embracing new faith traditions and living in religiously diverse communities, we have long enjoyed the academic study of faith traditions as a window to human understanding, and we have pursued ways to build stronger interfaith bridges and communities. Today, Paul is joined by a distinguished panel who will discuss their faith traditions with a perspective on how that shapes diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'll hand it over to Paul to introduce the panel and welcome again.
All right, thank you very much. I did buy a birthday present for the Chancellor when we had a nice celebration this past weekend. Welcome, and I'm very pleased to introduce our opening panel here today. Starting from my left, Swami Nishpapananda is a monk of the Ramakrishna Order of India and an assistant minister of the Vedanta Society of St. Louis, where he has resided since 1974. He's a graduate of Washington University and is active in interfaith work in the St. Louis area. And moving a little more to my left, Elvira Mandukic is the faculty development coordinator at Webster University. He's a graduate of UMSL with his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Marketing, and International Business, and his Master of Education also from UMSL, Master of Education degree. He's active in numerous interfaith and bridge-building organizations. And last but by no means least, Rabbi Noah Arno, the Rabbi of Kol Ranah. He joined that synagogue in August 2014. He's a graduate of Brown University and the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York. He's known as a passionate and experienced leader and teacher of adults and children. And just to make a note of, since we're all men up here, one of our original speakers was Rory, Maharat Rory Pickard-Neese, the executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Center. She was called away at the last minute to testify over in Jeff City. So we had more gender diversity originally, but she graciously, helped me find the highly recommended Rabbi Arno, and we are glad to have him today, and we wish Rory luck in her ongoing work, and, not only at the JCRC, but also in Jeff City. So as Beth says, our panel has to do with diversity and how diversity affects our religious beliefs. And I will just start by throwing an initial question out to the panel, whoever would like to respond first. How is your faith tradition an important part of your identity?
Okay, I'll go first.
There you go.
First of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina originally. I came here 26 years ago from former Yugoslavia, or Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia when I grew up. In my family, we have various faith traditions. So asking me the identity, what I identify with, I would say I identify with people. I do practice Islam. I am a Muslim. So if you want to use the term in translation, the one who is surrendered to God. And I try that to my best. Through Islamic tradition, the values that I've seen in the life of Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, and other prophets, I'm trying to become part of my daily living. But talking about sameness or identity, living in such diverse environment in my home, both in Bosnia and here in America with American families, Presbyterians actually, and actually Catholics who enrolled me in a school, I came to understanding that really people are just people. I was sponsored by American Polish Jew to come to the United States and study. So if you want to talk about religious values, we all study them most either through our schooling or from our friends. But how do I identify? When I'm with my Jewish friends or Catholic friends or my Buddhist friends, I'm just with my friends. So that's what matters to me. We share the food, we share the stories of our family, of our lives, and because I believe that God created us all human beings, and we should love. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm Swami Nishpapananda, as you probably guessed from my ochre robes. My identity as a Hindu monk of the Ramakrishna Order of India defines me kind of tightly. I mean, monk, there are certain rules. You do certain things and you don't do certain things. The biggest perk is that I get to meditate twice a day, every day, no matter what. Normally people have to find time to work that into their busy schedules. And have the opportunity to serve whoever comes in my path as manifestations of the divine. As far as faith identity, You see, the primary discovery of the Hindu ethos is not polytheism or panentheism, as is often understood. The primary discovery is quite different. The ancient sages of India discovered, looking for something that was eternal in the midst of the non-eternal, that this conscious principle that observes our minds, our bodies, the external world, is the only unchanging factor. And that conscious principle we don't experience in and of itself. We experience it in the process of cognition, the knower, the object of knowledge, the process of knowledge. But that conscious principle is not just consciousness, it's loving consciousness. And that's what stands behind the ego and gives it its continuity. And that loving consciousness, which is called Atman in Sanskrit, is exactly the same in every human being. And this is where we stand equally. So if my goal as a Hindu monk and as a Hindu is to approach that divine reality, which is always there through waking, dreaming, through deep sleep, continuously, and experience it as it is, then to the extent that I'm successful in that endeavor through my life, which is not just meditation, everything it's cumulative. To the extent that I can connect with that center of loving consciousness, which is beyond all our ego identifications, I can connect with everyone else at that level. It changes my life, and it changes how people react to me as well, at a very deep level. So you say, my identity is something very specific in one sense. I'm a Hindu monk, I wear ochre robes, I learn Sanskrit, I do certain things every day with my life. And those are the specificities which are quite different than the specificities of the other panelists. But in terms of that loving consciousness, and to the extent that I can approach and reach that loving consciousness through the traditions and symbols that are valuable to me, then that reaches out to the other panelists at a deep level. And when we meet and we talk together, we'll feel this commonality. It's beyond our humanity. It transcends our humanity. It's the divinity that manifests our humanity. And this is the identity, the religious identity, which I seek and which I try to identify with.
It's beautiful. So Jewish identity is a little funny, actually, because what is Judaism? Judaism is it's a religion, yeah, a faith tradition as it's sometimes described in a more ecumenical sense. But it's also more than that. Judaism is an ethnicity. Some people would call it, or have called it at least, a race. Judaism is also a culture, and not, by the way, just one culture, because Jews who, let's say, come from Yemen have a very different culture than Jews who come from, let's say, the Ukraine. And Jews who live in Chesterfield, their Judaism might look a little different from Jews who live in the Ukraine right now, also. So there's great diversity within Jewish tradition and within Jewish identity. But and not every Jew has, I would say, a strong faith and belief and religious identity. Some Jews who are Jews by choice, who have come to Judaism later in life, don't have a strong background of Jewish ethnicity and Jewish culture, but their faith is very robust. So there are various different ways that Jewish identity can manifest itself. Sometimes we talk about believing belonging, and, what's the last one? And behaving. All right? So there are Jews who believe and don't behave or belong so much, and you could pick your axes. I'm a rabbi, so I've had to spend a lot of time thinking about my identity and my Jewish identity, and so I probably would, be pretty active in my behaving, believing, and belonging. Having grown up Jewish in a robustly Jewish home, and having made creating and fostering Jewish community a major part of my life, Jewish identity is really, core to who I am and how I see myself and understand the way I go through the world.
Thank you. I was, as our speakers were speaking here, I was thinking about an experience I had when I was 10 years old, which was back in the 1960s, but my hometown vacation Bible school class made a field trip to the nearest synagogue, which in rural Illinois was a half hour away, but it was became a formative experience for me in realizing a very simple thing. There are other faiths besides Protestant Christianity, and it really planted a seed in my life, which grew over time and helped make diversity and consciousness of religious and interfaith traditions part of my own Christian faith. I'll ask my panelists now, how do you maintain your own sense of identity while embracing and respecting others' traditions, and what helps you to do that?
Okay, I'll go again.
Yeah.
Since I started that way. How do I keep sense of my identity? Well, as I said, as a Muslim, I do practice as a Muslim my prayers and fasting and everything else. But at the same time, and I've been doing this even here at Webster for 10 years. We had a large group of students from Middle East, so I said, how can we welcome those students? But then I said, I can't do this at my home as I do with my neighbors and friends. So I said, let's do it at Webster. But how can I do it at Webster? It should be I should mimic the same Bosnian Balkan culture where we get together as people. And so even though it is holiday, like Ramadan, and month of fasting, but how can we invite everybody? So I created an event with the help of other community members at Webster and St. Louis at large community, and invited everyone to share a meal. And that was truly, for Muslims, a religious experience, but for our friends and neighbors, a cultural experience. And at least to my understanding, I always got good feedback, and we did it for 10 years prior to pandemic. And also, I would say that what I do is whenever there's another holiday, whether it's a Christmas, Hanukkah, when my friends invite me, I join them. When there's an event on campus, for example, since I'm here working on campus, or if I'm in town and I know a particular event, I will try to join it with my children. Why? Because I want to learn more about it. Also, honoring each other is very important. Embracing, accepting each other, not passing a judgment, taking things as they are. Once we put our thoughts to it, then we start adding our emotions to it. But we need just to recognize something as is and fully recognize another human being around us. And that's, I think, what I've learned growing up, what I learned from my Presbyterian host mother, belated Diane. This is what I learned from my Jewish Ukrainian friends. This is what I learned from my Irish Catholic friend and sponsor who helped me to come to the United States, from my colleagues here at work. I think in my the way how I do it, and I will just be simple. I have a lot of quotes from Quran. I said I'm not going to preach you here anything about philosophy, but what I've been trying to impart with my children is I want them just to recognize that there are people around us and that we all need to be together and that try to engage with each other. And this is what I've been working on myself, learning. If I don't know what is Yom Kippur, I need to learn. If I don't know about Atman, but actually I did study comparative religion in my honors class at UMSL, so I did study Atman, I did study Brahman too, and I fell in love with Brahman. Yes, I am Muslim, but I can draw parallels among various philosophies, faith traditions actually. I'm also Interfaith Partnership of St. Louis. I'm with Compassionate St. Louis organization. Because what I saw as a purpose in my life, in addition to submitting myself to the divine, to manifestation of divine, that loves everything, and I need to learn how to love everything and encourage others to love everything. I hope, even through Compassionate St. Louis, that others can, with love and kindness, to embrace everything around them. And that's why I hope that this is one of the messages that can be resonating with your hearts. Thank you.
So the question was how to, this one, how do you maintain your own sense of identity while embracing and respecting others' traditions? What helps you do that? Well, there's a statement in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest religious text, that says in translation, truth is one. Sages call it by various names. So, with this basic understanding of religion, truth with a capital T refers to the divine, which can't really be expressed in words, can't be encompassed by symbols. And with this as a basic understanding of how religion works, Hinduism is not really a religion, it's a confederacy of religions, many different beliefs and practices, many different calendars, lunar and solar and solar-lunar combined. There's tremendous variety in religious expression and belief, which has grown up through the millennia in this religion that's called Hinduism, because of this basic outlook that truth can't be encompassed in words. And in our chapel at the Vedanta Society, when we expanded it, we put a plaque up that kind of visually represents this. In the center of the plaque is kind of a stylized sun, and then out of that sun are rays. And those rays come out to the circumference of the circle, and at the circumference are the symbols of 8 major world religions. So truth is one, but sages call it by various names. So these different religious approaches, which are quite different at the periphery, as they approach that truth, they become more similar. And the truth that's reached becomes more difficult to express. And when you actually reach that truth, you express it according to the language that you have, according to the symbols that you have, as best you can, but it's inadequate. So it's not hearing and believing, it's being and becoming. So in that sense, you can recognize and appreciate the differences without being threatened by them. Because ultimately, the goal is that religious, that divine essence, which is beyond words or expression. And in my own little subset of Hinduism, I already said it's a huge confederation of religions. I'm in the Ramakrishna order of India. Sri Ramakrishna lived from 1836 to 1886. And his life, as far as we know, best exemplifies this ancient truth that's articulated in the Vedas. He grew up, learned to read and write, dropped out at the age of 7. I don't want the kind of education that puts a roof over your head and food on your plate. I want the kind of religion I want the kind of education that solves the problem of life and death. He started to spontaneously have mystic experiences as a child. And when he became an adult, one after another, he practiced the different religious traditions within Hinduism under teachers of mystic teachers, qualified mystic teachers, and realized that ineffable truth beyond symbol and language through each of those paths. And then in his own way, he practiced Christianity, had the vision of Christ twice, recognized him as God incarnate. He practiced Islam under a Sufi master, had that experience of the ineffable through that tradition. And through his own experience said, the paths are many, but the goal is the same. So these are the kind of, so theologically, we have a bent towards acceptance intellectually. Now, the practice of it's a little more difficult because we have our human limitations. But the ideal is there. And it's possible. I mean, we have those examples in front of it. It's possible. So even though we're imperfect, we work at it.
There is a kind of anxiety that I think is rooted, that the question is rooted in. Jews are inveterate questioners of questions. The rabbis, asked, why do Jews always answer a question with a question? And the rabbi says, why not? And that anxiety is that encounter with the other will somehow infect us. And I use the word infect in the negative sense, right? That if I, as a Jew, go and learn about Christianity, then, I'm going to, be converted to Christianity and won't be Jewish anymore. This is the fear that has undergirded a lot of anxiety about interfaith relationships, I think, across faith traditions for a really long time. And so the idea of people like us sitting here together talking about faith is a relatively newfangled thing. And there, I will say, there are Jews who would not do such a thing because of the fuzzy boundaries. And my own approach to this, and I think this is relatively common in liberal Jewish traditions, is to say that if I'm secure enough in who I am, I don't need to be threatened by being in conversation with others. There is so much to learn from other traditions and other people, and maybe I will actually learn something that will enhance my own Jewish life. And if what one of my esteemed panelists says is so penetrating and compelling to me that I want to give up being a rabbi and become a Swami, then in some way, okay. I could imagine some people being, upset about that, but that doesn't mean that any of our goals is to try to convert the other either. So to me, being rooted in one's own tradition and loving it and being secure there means that then we actually really can encounter others comfortably and learn from others. And when my congregants come to me and say, so I'm thinking about looking at a different congregation or even a different religion, or people come to me and say, I'm thinking about, I want to become Jewish, sometimes I'll send them back and send them to go talk to a religious leader from their own tradition first, just to make sure that that's actually not the right place for them. So maybe that's enough.
Yeah. A thought occurred to me while you were talking, Rabbi. there's a comparative religious scholar who died about 5 or 6 years ago named Houston Smith, who spent his formative years in St. Louis at Washington University and was in the late 40s and early 50s, and was closely associated with the Vedanta Society in St. Louis from that time. And he was the son of Methodist missionaries to China. Born in China, spent the first 17 years of his life in China, came here to become a missionary, switched to become a minister, and then became an academic. And he really, in academia, opened up academia to the acceptance of these different religious traditions with all their variety and so on and so forth. A seminal figure. But one of the things he said that's pertinent to this question is he'd be challenged. He says, you're a Methodist minister. What are you doing? Not just studying, but practicing these other traditions. You know, going to the Zazen and meditating with the Swamis and going to the sweat lodge. And he said, well, he says, Christianity is my meat and potatoes, but I can take vitamins.
That's good. Yeah, Houston Smith's book is a wonderful one. It used to be called The Religions of Man when I read it in college. Now it's the world's religions. But I was thinking of a time when I interviewed a Sikh man researching a short book I wrote several years ago, and he said that one does not have to convert to Sikhism, but if one reads the scriptures of Sikhism, the Gurbani, it would help one understand one's own faith better. And I just love that. That as you know, as a Christian will read the Torah, the Upanishads, the Quran, that as I don't have to worry about somehow I'm going to slip in my Christian faith, which is I think is a thing in Christianity. Historically, it's people have been punished for looking into other faiths historically, but the idea of learning from other faiths and letting our friendships with one another and our religious traditions enrich and fill us with love and and understanding. Another question here, as far as biases and stereotypes, which is a more painful subject here. What kind of biases and stereotypes have you encountered, about your tradition, and how have you gone about addressing those when you have encountered such things?
I'll start for this one. I'm really not interested in rehashing anti-Semitic stereotypes here. Google them, or preferably don't. And even within a tradition, there are stereotypes. So one of this, like this stereotypes of, my denomination of Judaism, I have to overcome sometimes with my own congregants. And just to get people sometimes to walk in the door of a synagogue that's not their own, that is to say they have their own synagogue, and to get them to walk into the door of a different one just for something else, there are actually all kinds of biases and stereotypes that people need to overcome, which is to say that Jews are terribly biased and stereotyped and stereotype people because they're human, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones. And yes, we've also been victims of bias and stereotype too. And that's something that's become a little more visible and present over the last number of years. but it's in all of our hearts. And it's just a matter of how loudly and how nastily we say it and we express it.
Well, so one of the stereotypes of Hinduism, especially from a Western religious tradition perspective, is graven images, idolatry. You hear about this in the Hebrew Bible. It's not a good thing. And you look at the Indian temples, and the outside of the Gopuram is just filled with images of gods and goddesses, and it's just chock full of these things that look like idols. And as well as there's this whole huge religion they're idol worshippers. Actually, the reason that all those gods and goddesses are on the outside of the temple, it says, okay, if you're content with the external kind of sensate manifestation of things, you'll never get inside the temple where you go beyond the senses and beyond our limitations as human beings. It's just telling you. It's all out there. It's easily accessible, but if you want the real good stuff, you have to pull away from that and go inside the temple to the sanctum sanctorum. So, and another way of dealing with idol worshippers is Hindus are not idol worshippers. Hindus are ideal worshippers. And all human beings are ideal worshippers. And ideals are subtle, they're abstract, but they're highly motivating. Those are the things that we understand and live for. And in order to focus on that which is abstract, the normal human mind needs something which is concrete, a symbol, two-dimensional, three-dimensional, which will focus the mind which wants to externalize. God so created human beings with their senses directed outwards. Rare is that wise person who, desirous of that direct experience of divinity, turns his eyes inward. So this is a little way to counter-cheat the genes, which want to take us outward and externalize our consciousness. Use that externalization on a symbol which has deep meaning for the highest spiritual truths. Focus your mind on that, and through that deep concentration on that, you'll transcend the symbol and go towards what is symbolized. Okay? So Hindus aren't idol worshippers. Hindus are ideal worshippers. But everyone is an ideal worshipper. And another analogy is if you want to point out the North Star and you just go up there and point, how are you going to know you're talking about the same star? So, but if you go, it says, well, you see that, if you point out the Big Dipper, and you get the Big Dipper, and you get those two stars that point to the North Star, then you can do it. So you start off with something less subtle, and you move gradually from that to something that's more subtle. And that's the whole idea behind image worship. It's not image worship, it's ideal worship.
Wow, it comes to my mind in groups. So we all identify with something or someone or a group of people, whether a family or city people or the same club or football team. And if we think that way, there's always the other, unless we step from that circle, from that group. Even when I think of Islam, or I think of Judaism or Hinduism, nothing is monolithic. Yes, there are certain traits, but if we just think that way and pass our judgments based on what we want to believe, then of course, biases will be there because we are with certain in-group. But once we join another group, then they become part of our group. Then group is expanding. And as we keep doing that, so slowly certain biases are shedding off from our lives and our thinking. So just be careful what you think, because what you think, you will speak. What you speak, you will act. What you act, you will, it will become your habit, and that will become your character. And then your character will become your destiny, and that's going to become your life. And here you go. Thank you.
Okay. All right. My mind was just kind of thinking of the first time I went to a Hindu temple was actually in Beth's hometown in south near Chicago, the greater Hindu temple of Chicago, and experienced the the beauty of the different deities, different avatar, the different representations of God. But my mind also went to many churches which will have a large representation of Jesus and different saints or Jesus's mother, and just thinking about the parallels there of the visual representation, but of, I think Paul Tillich said that the symbol is something that participates in the reality, and so this this is a symbol, but which you could relate to, but you're finding the reality there that it's representing. But also, respecting the traditions like Judaism and Islam, which do not have images, but are more, linguistically oriented or word oriented. And again, it's finding the commonalities that often is something that helps us overcome those biases. Maybe we've already asked or maybe we've already answered the other question I have here is, what are the sources of biases and stereotypes in our perceptions of other faiths? I'll throw that out a little bit.
I'll just say that by nature, I don't want to speak about anyone else's faith tradition, but Judaism, thinks it's right. And maybe you have that sense about your own faith tradition too, that there's the sense within that tradition that tradition is actually, correct, and in some ways not just as correct as anyone else, but actually more correct, better, and that's, I think, fairly common to religious traditions, and Judaism certainly has that sense too, and I think we actually have to work hard to be not just tolerant, but really acknowledging that there are multiple truths, to really be pluralistic, and because that doesn't come naturally within, I think, to many of our faith traditions. And maybe it doesn't come naturally to people either. Our faith traditions are reflections of us in some ways. And even within any tradition, trust me, every Jew thinks that they're doing Judaism just right and that everybody else is doing it wrong. You can tell me, is that the case with Christians? With Muslims? Because often we have the greatest vitriol for the people who are different from us but the closest, right? So I have great admiration for traditions that really have a broad love of everyone, and We all, I think, need to look inside ourselves and our traditions to work on the, maybe it's supersessionism, that's kind of a Christian word, but the sense that ours is the best. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being proud of one's own tradition too.
Yeah. Well, I think the basic answer is the source of biases and stereotypes in our perceptions of other faiths. I think the root cause is ignorance. And the solution to that problem is knowledge. And in my own experience, being involved with interfaith partnership for many years, I found the dialogue groups, the monthly dialogue groups that I was involved with over the years, and as a participant, as a monthly participant, and in some cases as a speaker, were just really exemplary. And you realize over time that what draws people to these interfaith dialogues is their own goodness. And each of their traditions that they represent has helped engender that goodness. So, being a decent human being is a remarkably impressive achievement, Religions help us do this. I'm not talking about the superficial level, the polite level. I'm talking about deep decency, where you really care for others, and that care finds expression from your heart. You're not thinking, well, what can that person do for me? And you're not doing it politically. That unselfishness is engendered by true religious participation and sincerity. And discovering that goodness in people from other traditions, then you want to know, well, how did you do it? I mean, it's such a struggle. How did you do it in your tradition? What are your symbols that work for you? And it's enriching. It's really enriching, but it comes through that human dimension. You have to sit together. You have to know each other over time so that you kind of drop your defenses and really kind of open up to one another. And I remember just one example of this. I was in one of the Interfaith Partnerships dialogues groups in the early part of this century, and the first meeting after 9/11, that we just dropped everything, and that's what we talked about. And I'll tell you, I learned more in that 2 hours than I learned in the next 2 years about the dynamic of that whole interaction. But it was through those personal contacts.
Wow. Quran and 113 surahs out 114, one is repentance, that doesn't start with a famous verse, in the name of Allah, and there are different translations, but in the name of Allah, the infinitely compassionate, the dispenser of grace, is how the verses start, and how the book starts. And when I'm thinking about compassion, sense of love and kindness that we have, all of us, as manifest of the Creator, and how much does it resonate, that compassion in our hearts, is something what's been for me a guidance, and that's what I'm trying to share with others. So there are multiple verses. I mean, I'm not a scholar, I'm a believer. And I do have a lot of references, but I'll just speak from my heart. Just one thing that comes to my mind. First of all, we talk here about religion. There is no definition of religion. Many scholars disagree about the definition of religion, first of all. And you can explore this on your own. But even in Islam, we think of deen. And I don't use Western traditional interpretation of religion, even though they translate word deen as religion. To me, deen is way of life, or it's a way of consciousness, of how do I relate to everything around me and myself, within myself. And so deen is a way of life. And what couple of verses that come to my head is in Quran, it clearly states, Allah clearly tells humankind what Muslims believe. To you, your way of life. To me, my way of life. But from this, I drew a message that everybody has a way of life. And this is something as a way I look at other lives, that everybody has a way of life. And if we accept that there are ways of life, then we can start growing compassion and radiating it toward others. And get out of our in-group. Whatever that is.
Yeah. All right, terrific. We're looking at one of the questions here, and we've one of the questions sent in, and you folks have kind of answered one of these here. We're sure we're almost out of time, but how do each of you counter or use your faith to help reach the hearts and minds of those who really want to love and live together amid those voices that continue to create chaos in society? Wow, what a great question. And you folks have been talking about friendship and understanding and fellowship. I don't know if anything else to add to that in response to kind of being an example in a divided society.
There's another thing in Quran. It says, Inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Indeed, verily, Allah, God Almighty, is with the sabirin. Sabirin are those who are steadfast in patience. Patience is a virtue. And being patient with those learning, it's very important. And that's, I would say, that is essential. There is a shadow child in us. Some have more shadow child in us than others. Others have more sun child in us than others. And this is from the words from the book, The Child in You, by psychotherapist Stephanie Stahl. And everybody has baggage from their childhood that they carry. And that's part of our identities. But we have to be patient while we are learning, when we encounter those around us. So when we see those reactions, we cannot just take it just the face value alone. We have to have a little bit more compassion and approach it with that love and kindness and try to see where it comes from. Oftentimes we don't have patience. We just take it the face value and immediately pass judgment.
I'll say a word about this. Start in your own heart. Mm-hmm. Start in your own house, in your own home, in your own family, in your own community. Because I guarantee that with any other people that we are interacting with, there will be chaos. We don't need to find people who are as different from us as possible to find conflict. We can work on creating peace in our own hearts and in our own homes, and that can be plenty of work on its own. Has anybody here ever lived with anybody else? And I just want to say, just to get to kind of the practical piece of this, noting and being aware of the diversity in our own communities, in our own traditions, is so important. Because Jews don't all look like me. There are Jews of color, there are Jews of all different abilities, there are LGBTQ plus Jews, there are Jews who are women, by the way, all right? And recognizing that amazing diversity in my own tradition is, by the way, hard and work. And my ability to do it with the people closest to me gives me, I think, more ability to do it with people who are more distant from me. And the peace that's created within a community from doing that, I think, has the opportunity to radiate out, and the lessons, the experiences, and the practices, kind of train us to do that with others with whom we might share, frankly, a little bit less.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you folks have enjoyed our panel as much as I have, and learning and gaining the insights that one another has here. So if you will give them a hand. All right. Thank you so much. And here comes my friend Vincent.
Such a great session to get us started, so thank you all again. As a reminder, our keynote speaker is two-time Olympic champion Lori Hernandez, and she will take the stage tonight at 7 p.m. over at the Loretto Hilton Center. There's still time for you to join us either in person or virtually by registering at webster.edu/DEI Conference 2022. You won't want to miss it. Lori's visit to Webster is a timely reminder that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX. This landmark legislation has impacted the lives and opportunities of girls and women here at Webster and beyond since 1972. Our women's athletes are certainly making the most of these opportunities. And if you've been around campus, you know that our women's basketball team is the SLIAC undefeated champions, and they will play this Saturday in the NCAA Division III championship. Our women's volleyball, softball, soccer, track and field, cross country, and tennis teams are shining this year as well. And if you'd like to join us in paying tribute to this milestone anniversary, you can make a gift in support of Webster's women's athletic programs. You can easily make that gift by scanning the QR code that's found on page 1 in the print or digital program book, or by using the leaflets that are at your table. Our next session will begin at 10:30. Feel free to take a break for refreshments, and we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you.
I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we